to this last session of this first conference, remote conference on the legacy of Socrates. And now I have the pleasure to introduce you to Khaled, Khaled Souf, who is a consultant working in Zenica here in Montreal, Canada. He is also the co-organizer of the Software Crafters meetup in Canada, in Montreal. So I know him very well. And remember that Carola earlier, she told you about how to apply domain-driven design with a legacy system and how difficult is that to integrate with the big ball of mud and the anti-corruption layer, etc. Well, Khaled is going to talk to you about how to apply domain-driven design on legacy code. So without further ado, Khaled, please, your turn.
Okay, thank you. So, hi everyone. I'm going to talk today about how to apply domain-driven design on the legacy code. Before starting, if you want to know about me, Nicola already introduced me, but if you'd like to know me more, you get my website on the slides. So before getting to applying domain-driven design, we need to define what is a legacy code. There is one definition that most people know about it. It's the one that gives us Michael Feathers. It's a code without a test. And also, for those who didn't read the book, I recommend it. It's a must for the people that they were working with legacy code. Actually, the definition I like the most is this one. So yeah, it's something that's been living there for maybe, let's say not million of years, but maybe for 10, 20, maybe 15 years. Nobody knows how it works, and nobody knows why it is existing. So when we are talking about legacy codes, we are talking about lost knowledge. At some points, there are some people, they worked in that code, and maybe they moved on to another company, they moved on to something else. So this is how we get legacy code. We lose knowledge about how the code actually works and how the code should be working. So how do we get back that knowledge? You need to know that there is always somebody who knows the history of all code. If it is not a person, it can be many persons. They get, every one of them has the slice of information, a piece of information about the system, and all the knowledge that they have as a group, it's going to be the history of all that code. You need to know about that history to know how to deal with the legacy code. So how do we get that history and knowledge? One of the things that I usually use is using Evenstorming to do it. What is Evenstorming? The thing is gathering people in the same room. You need two types of people. One that they have questions and the other one who have the answers. Providing unlimited modeling space, and then exploring the domain, the business domain, using what we call domain events. So from this workshop, usually you're going to find multiple patterns. One of them is the knowledge is spread between all the people, so you need to gather them and they share knowledge on that stuff. The other one is you're going to find two people, they know more about the system than the others. Unfortunately, these people is anti-patterns. One of them is called the dungeon master, and the other one is what we call an existing system expert. So what is a dungeon master? Going back to the definition of Alberto Brandolini, the guy who, the person who is the inventor of Evenstorming, he is somebody who wrote the original software, so he is a developer, and he started that project, that product, and he knows everything, every piece of code of that system. And in most cases, he stays in developing, in maintaining that product. And if it is not the case, he's gonna stay not so far away from that. I already seen some people, they move it for the business side, they're not coding anymore, but they were the first one that created that kind of legacy code. So sometimes it's really weird when we are a team working on a legacy code and you're gonna ask somebody else who is outside the team about how the code it works. So how do we get the information from the dungeon master? And like I said, because they are anti-patterns, the dungeon master, usually they don't, how to put it, usually they have some perverted comprehension of the system. So what you need to do to get the best information from them is doing a mob programming or a pair programming. A mob programming is gathering many people using one computer. Somebody who's gonna type in the computer, the other one, they're gonna say him what he should type. The other one is pair programming. So you can do, it's gonna be with two people in the same computer. One is typing the code, the other one is telling him what to type. The only thing that I add to this existing technique is one rule: we should give less the keyboard to the dungeon master, because the goal of this session is that we get the most information about how the legacy system it works. And if you after you do that, I also recommend that we do some scratch refactor to check if we get the information well or not. So we do some scratch refactoring. We try to break things and leaning to the compiler. So now we're going back to the other profile, the person that we call the existing system expert. That person, in most cases, he knows exactly how the system works. He knows every trap about the system, but he doesn't know anything about the legacy code. The code, maybe that person didn't see it at all. In most cases, it's going to be a QA engineer, because he always testing that system, so he knows every traps on the system. Maybe a user that has been there for a long time, and sometimes it's going to be sometimes a product owner who was a tester at some point, a QA engineer at some point. So how do we get the information about the system, about the legacy system from the existing system experts? Ask them to run a global demonstration of the system, so you can get the whole big picture how the system it works. And then in every details, try to get some details about how the data is structured, how the process is working, and other stuff. And if he's a QA, try to ask them how they test the application if somebody do a bug fix or implement a feature. And sometimes, and I say sometimes, but in most of the cases that I've been there, I got some nice surprise, because some of them, they are implementing automated tests, end-to-end automated tests on the legacy system. And that really gives you real value, how to understand system, and you can use them after that as a non-regression test if you do some refactoring. So from what we've done as workshop to get that lost knowledge, we're gonna find three things mostly that I find is you're gonna identify the deprecated feature. Some feature they are not used, they were used at some point, but right now they are obsolete, so we don't need them at all. Figure out if you have a hidden feature. What we call hidden feature right here is sometimes what the customers ask for them, a specific feature, but you don't find any information about that at all. One of the cases that I've been there is like one of the customers, they were asking about CSV export or something like that, some generated PDF. These are the kind of stuff that you find it in the hidden feature. Sometimes also some people, they call them customer service. And the third one is check if there is a shift of the core domain, because usually there are. The thing is, at some point when we start with our legacy, working in our legacy system, 10 years ago, the core domain is something, and right now maybe it shifted. One of the cases that I can, one of the examples that I can give you is Slack. The company Slack, actually, before they were a game development company, and they created a channel for gamers. So at some point, they've done some shift of the core domain, and their core domain right now is really the tool that you are using. It's not really the game itself. So now that we have enough confidence to take decision, because we get all the information that we need from these people, in most cases, I've seen 3 choices based on the level of confidence of our understanding of the legacy system. The first one is when you think that you don't understand enough your system. What I usually do is exposing it as a legacy system, as a service, maybe an API or something like that, using the pattern of DDD that is called open host service. So I publish the legacy feature using some small mapping to reduce the complexity in the legacy system to the outside. And then if I have a new feature, the new feature is going to create it in its own context. And usually we call that a bubble context because it's not really interacting with directly with the legacy system. It's going to interact with him using the open host service. The schema that I'm showing right now, this is what I'm talking about. So right now, right here, we have the legacy system. We create something that is going to expose one of the services of the legacy system here using some few mapping, maybe also new technologies or something like that. It can be part of the legacy code, but it can also be a standalone thing that is only calling the legacy system by any means. And every time we create a new feature, we create a bubble context, and it's gonna only interact with the legacy system by the open host service. This is what I usually do when I'm not confident enough about my understanding of the legacy system and the legacy code. So when I get better in the level of confidence, what I usually do is I will always use a bubble context for the new feature. But the thing is, I will not use an open host service. Every bubble context, they're gonna try to use what we call an anti-corruption layer. So it will not get corrupted by the model of the legacy system. It's gonna use its own model, calling the service or the feature that we know about in the legacy system. Like this one. So right here, every bubble context, they're gonna create his own mapping and his own routine of calling the legacy system. It can be directly using an existing API. It can be directly accessing to the database. It can be many things. But in this case, it's really something that is really have some kind of logic in it. It's like use case service or something like that. And every time we create a bubble context, we have to keep that complexity in the anti-corruption layer. And when I have enough confidence that I say, hey, now I know almost everything about the bubble, about the legacy system. So every time I have a bug fix or something like that, I refactor, I extract it to a new bubble context. And if I have a new feature, it's the same case for the other level of confidence. So that's the big difference between the other, between this one and the others, is right here, even if it is a fixing bug, we create a bubble context and we move the code to that bubble context. So the legacy system is have less features at some point. Also, another difference is that every bubble context, in this case, we're going to use really an anti-corruption layer, but really low-level service. What I call low-level service is like something that is not really smart. Something that is really, for example, is going to call maybe directly the database, maybe they're going to call some piece of code that we know already very well. So in this case, what we're going to have is a bubble context. You're going to have multiple anti-corruption layer based off what he needs about the legacy system. It's like the thing about this kind of approach is like every anti-corruption layer is like asking different system. We know that we are asking the same system using multiple anti-corruption layer, but in our case, we're gonna manage it like every anti-corruption layer is calling a different system. So, what I think that you should take away from what I've been talking about is always take an action only if there is an opportunity. If there is a value about bug fixing, refactoring, about extracting the feature in a new bubble context, maybe moving the code of a feature outside of the legacy system, do it only when it is needed. Try to understand how the legacy system works using the workshop that we've been talking about, like Evenstorming and mob and pair programming for the code. Evenstorming to know the big picture about how the system works in a business way, and the mob and pair programming, how the code works. Work wisely with the dungeon master and the existing system experts, because it's like what we call a weapon, a double-edged weapon. So take the information that you need, but don't take all the information, because these people usually they are using the system for a long time, so they think that's the way that it should work. And also, you're gonna move from a level of confidence, so you need to combine these strategy. You can use one of these strategy, but you can switch also between them based on the feature. Sometimes you're gonna, you know that you understand the feature very well, and you're gonna use the strategy that I showed you for the higher level of confidence. But for another feature, you don't know anything about it, so you're going to use the legacy as service approach, and you're going to say, hey, okay, so this one, I'm not sure about what I'm doing. And also combine the anti-corruption layer, the open host service, and all the patterns that can help you in DDD. So thank you for attending. And if you have a question, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you very much, Khaled. So let's wait a few seconds for the questions to come in. Yeah, it was really interesting how to apply all of these techniques when you're actually in the context of an existing code base, which is most of the time, I would like to say. Hopefully, it's a very pragmatic approach. So thank you.
You're welcome.
So there is a first question you can already answer.
Yeah, go ahead.
How do you measure the level of confidence?
That's really interesting. Mostly what I do is I'm always starting with the low level of confidence. Even when I'm sure that I know very well about that feature. Because the thing about the legacy code, you need time to understand how it should work, how it is really working actually. So usually I'm using it as a legacy as service, and then by doing refactoring, every time that I'm using that feature, I'm going to that feature, I'm trying to refactor it, I'm trying to understand it. At some point, the code is going to be less messier than it was. At that point, I'm going to move to a higher level of confidence. I hope I answered the question well.
Well, to me, that was clear. No, I don't have any other question for the moment. So yeah, let's wait a bit. Personally, I do have one, so that can make us wait. I wonder, yeah, if you had an experience in like moving a team to do that, because it's not just the business people to convince, but for example, to practice mob programming, I've experienced a lot of resistance from the developers themselves. And so I would like to know what is your experience around that, and if you have any tips.
Yeah, one of the tips that I usually do is I try to do it when they have lunchtime. So I try by doing it in something else like kata, some kind of exercise, some kind of rendery, something like that. So it can be fun. And then from there, if we have some piece of code that is really complex, I try to say, hey guys, hey people, I'm sorry about that, but I think I can't do it alone. Nobody can do it alone. Why we take some kind of we schedule a meeting and let's go to a room and we try to figure out how the code it works and what we should do about that. And at that point, if that's why I'm not. I never say to them that we're going to use mob programming. I'm going to say to them, hey, let's gather in a room and let's try to figure out how we're going to do about that code. After we finish everything, I say, hey, this is what we call mob programming. Because the thing is, like the people, when you tell people using some kind of words like anti-corruption layer, mob programming, and they don't know about it, they are afraid about that, and they will try to not get into this kind of stuff.
Yeah, don't put off people with jargon. This is something we talked during the last Socrates Canada conference. It's really interesting topic. Thank you very much. I do have another question. So, how to manage data used in the legacy and in the new feature? So if we expose the legacy as a service, do we need to add some feature in the legacy before to manage the data that will be shared between the new feature and the legacy system?
Usually when you have a low level of confidence, you will not touch the data that is in the legacy system. But you can make your own copy on the bubble context. Let's say a clean copy on the bubble context. And then when you have enough confidence, you're gonna remove that part from the legacy system. But let me be frank with you, in the legacy system, the most complex thing to do is how to get rid of the structure of data that we already have.
Yeah.
So in most cases, what is complicated about the legacy code is not the code itself, it's the data that you are manipulating with that code.
That's true. That matches also my experience. And I think the strangler fig pattern that Tobias presented at the very beginning of the conference is one way to address that. I will share with the community, but I've read an article from Shopify, I think, very recent one, and they are tackling that aspect, like strangler fig pattern, and we have to deal with the data structure to move the data to the new code, new features.
Also, there is one technique that I've been using it at some point. It's really I've taken that from the DevOps side. They are using what we call canary release. So when you have the bubble context and you have new users, you will not publish their information to the legacy system. You're gonna only use their information from the bubble context. So you will not, and base it on when the user has joined your service, you're gonna, let's say you're gonna say, hey, this information, the legacy system, okay, so I'm gonna call the legacy system for it. This user is really new, so he should be in the new system or in the bubble context, so his information in the other side. This is one of the techniques that I use also, because sometimes, and then after you finish your, let's say, refactoring all the stuff, you're gonna start migrating user from the legacy system to the bubble context. They will not see anything because everything is really managed by the bubble context. He's the one to choose when to call the legacy system. This is one of the techniques that I'm using.
Yeah, that's very efficient. I have a follow-up question on that from Julio, which is why is the structure of the data the most difficult part to change? Is it because many things depend on it? So,
yeah, that's the case. Many things depend on it, and we don't know where is that information is used, where is the data is used. And in most cases, the same data, sometimes it's used in many places in the code. So we don't know where it is used. That's the problem of the data.
Thank you very much, Khaled. That was a very nice talk. So thank you, Khaled. Thank you, everyone, for attending.